In this video, I'm going to be identifying the major problems with the film Oblivion, solving those problems, and presenting a new version of the story to you today. Now, if you're interested in finding every major mistake in your screenplay, fixing those problems in a new rewritten draft in just 90 days without a frustrating rewriting process, then click the top link below where we can discuss working together one-on-one on your script. Now, without further ado, let's get into Oblivion. Oblivion feels like it should work. It has an all-star cast, a cool concept with many twists and turns, a soundtrack by M83 with that awesome title track. It also has many action sequences, the world looks super cool, it has great set pieces. So why a 53% from the critics and only a 61% from the audiences? What went wrong? Today I'm going to identify the problems in Oblivion, solve them, and build a new version of the story using my solutions with the goal of helping you solve the problems in your screenplay. Let's begin. Right off the bat, the most obvious problem with Oblivion is its lack of philosophical, ethical, or moral stakes. The story does try to have a theme. Our main character, Jack Harper, finds this book and reads this particular line here many times.
How can a man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods?
So this quote is said multiple times throughout the film. And in the end of the story, Jack Harper dies and saves the world in the process. Cool, but there aren't actually any philosophical stakes. Jack saves the world, but so what? What does Jack actually struggle with through the story? Does Jack have an arc? No. Do any of the characters have an arc? No, not really. Critics said that some of the performances and the dialogue were bad, but they are looking at the wrong problem. It's not that the performances were bad, it's that they had nothing to work with because of the lack of philosophical stakes. The film has multiple big, crazy action sequences, but none of them really seem to hold any weight. Why don't we care? We don't care because there are no philosophical stakes. If Jack dies in one of these scenes, what does it say philosophically? Well, nothing. And honestly, in regards to the current quote-unquote theme of the film, Jack could die at any point in the story, you could slap that quote on the end, and the theme still holds. Sure, he didn't save the day, but he died doing what he could, and we could go back and talk about how could a man die better than facing fearful odds, and we could go from there. So that's problem one, a lack of any sort of real philosophical stakes. The characters in the story don't have any strong beliefs, and if they do, those beliefs are not tied to any sort of strong central philosophical theme that the story revolves around. The actions of the characters are barely tied to anything. This entire story is based around external conflict, some internal conflict with a relationship between Jack, Julia, and Victoria, but no real philosophical conflict. Let's take a look at these characters. So Jack doesn't really believe much of anything. He believes in fighting for Earth and for humanity, but that's about it. And then throughout the story, he simply finds out that he's on the wrong side, he changes sides, and that's pretty much it. It's all external conflict, not philosophical conflict. If we look at Morgan Freeman's character, Beach, what does Beach believe? Beach believes that Jack can help them, the humans, and Beach believes that they should keep fighting the Tet, but that's about it. He doesn't really struggle much. Julia is Jack's wife, and this is supposed to be deep in some way, but it doesn't really matter very much. He simply just has a wife that he wants to keep safe, and it helps reveal some of the elements of the concept, but there is no philosophical stakes. Victoria is another underutilized character. She's the other clone, yet all she does is get angry at Jack for loving Julia. If she had actual beliefs that worked within philosophical conflicts, she could be so much more interesting. Some of the scenes that are supposed to be deeply emotional just feel flat because they ultimately aren't about anything. So when Julia reveals to Jack that they are married, it's supposed to be super emotional, but it doesn't really mean anything. The scene when this happens actually has one of the most unintentionally funny lines of the film because the revelation that they are married doesn't actually matter.
And you said,
Yes.
When Victoria keeps Jack out of the base, it's just because she's angry at him for picking Julia, not for any real other reason. And so the depth of the moment is not really there, even though the actors give it their all. When Jack and Beach finally get to the Tet, they simply fly in with ease, deliver some speeches, and blow it to bits. So what? The movie gives us the line from the book once again, trying to add some depth to the climax, but it doesn't really connect. Okay, so how do we solve these problems? How do we give this story a philosophical conflict? We do so with character beliefs that are in conflict. So we need to build two major competing viewpoints, and let's use what the film already starts with.
How can a man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods?
Okay, great. So essentially this quote is saying that everyone dies, and ideally you want to die for something meaningful, defending your loved ones and your culture. So let's actually challenge this idea with the events of the story and force the characters into a meaningful philosophical conflict. Here are some questions that we can use to start us on our path. When is it time to stop fighting? When does it stop being honorable to fight the enemy? When do you stop fighting for lost causes? Is it always honorable to keep fighting even if it costs everything? From these ideas, we can start to build two major viewpoints that we can set into conflict in the story. Viewpoint 1, it is honorable to die for what you believe in. This seems pretty obvious, right? We should fight to the very end, no matter what. This is the same belief as the quote. Now, viewpoint 2, it is not honorable to die for no reason. Suicide missions or blatant stupidity should not be seen as honorable. Bravery and stupidity are not the same thing. Is it honorable to send people on suicide missions for something you know won't work? So now we have two competing views. Now that we have this, we can attach beliefs to the characters that fit on this spectrum in a way where we can explore this dilemma in an interesting way. Attaching beliefs to characters. Let's build new characters by starting with what they believe. Let's start with Jack. Jack now believes in fighting to the end and doing his duty for humanity. However, he's going to lose his way when he realizes that he's a soulless clone, and then he must find his purpose once again to destroy the Tet. Now let's look at Beach. Beach used to believe in fighting to the end. But he's older now. He's seen failure after failure and is beginning to get more realistic. But Jack provides one last moment of renewed hope. Now let's look at Sykes. Sykes wants to keep fighting, but he believes it's hopeless. He wants to lead the next generation after Beach is gone. Maybe he doesn't like how Beach has led. He wants to focus on saving lives, not fighting a war that can't be won. Victoria offers Jack a way to go back. She doesn't believe that Jack is one of them because he's not. He's a clone. He doesn't owe them anything. And this is what she tries to convince Jack, that they should stay where they are and that they can be together just like how they were before. Julia has just awoken from her hypersleep and is super energized to fight. She believes that the humans should fight to the end. She doesn't have the same fatigue as Beach or Sykes. She thinks everyone is being overly weak and doesn't have the pain of realizing she's a clone like Jack or decades of fighting and death like Beach. So now when you put the characters on this spectrum, you can see how they sit in between these two viewpoints, holding certain beliefs that then are going to push Jack back and forth as he tries to figure out what the best thing to do is and make the correct choice. This is what we want. Jack at the center of this belief conflict. Okay, so now that we've solved the problems and the philosophical conflict and the characters, let's take a look at the structure. Now we're going to look at some of these structural problems. So the first act isn't too bad. It's a lot of exposition and just setting up the world, a lot of external conflict. Again, there is not much philosophical conflict, but what I do have a gripe with is about the 27-minute point. We have this huge explosion where one of the rigs goes down. But rather than this creating any sort of real problem, Jack immediately goes and relaxes in his hideout. And so rather than having to investigate or this sending us, heavily into the second act, we simply have him go and chill until the next major event, which is that Julia's ship comes down and crash lands. We have just this weird point that doesn't actually make any sort of sense for the structure, and then we move on. Now, in Act 2, a lot of this works pretty well in the first half of Act 2. So Julia and Jack must go back for the flight record. That makes sense. They go back. They get captured by the scavs. Oh, sudden reveal, the scavs are humans. Okay, great. All of that works out pretty well. But then from there, we go into, sort of no man's land once again, where for whatever reason, they don't immediately listen to the flight record. And then from there, they try to go back to Victoria, and then Victoria doesn't let them come back in because she is angry that Jack went with Julia, which is a fairly mediocre motivation. It doesn't have a ton of weight, but this does create our midpoint where Julia dies and then Jack is on the run. So the first half of Act 2 is working decently well. Where it really starts to get messy is the second half of Act 2. From here, Jack's plan kind of gets confusing, right? So rather than going into the radiation zone to find the truth, as Beach told him to do, he simply runs away from the drones, and then when he's shot, he is forced into the radiation zone because of the drones, and then finds, sudden reveal, Tech 5-2, another one of the clones. And so then from here, again, another thing happens where Julia is hurt. So we go on this other sequence where he goes to Tech 5-2's base to grab her and then to come back to heal Julia. And it's fine, but it doesn't really change too much. It just shows us that he's a clone, which is information we could have already known from Beach, which then we hear again when we return in the beginning of Act 3, where Beach just tells Jack again what's going on. And so the whole second half of Act 2 gets real messy, and we're not really going anywhere. And again, because this whole story is built upon a concept and not some sort of philosophical conflict, it's just giving us reveal rather than like really giving us a development of character depth, of character journey, of any of these sort of core elements of writing. Going into Act 3, the story starts to kind of get back on pace again, where we have Jack fixing the drone for the ultimate plan, which is for this drone to go up to the Tet, but then that plan is foiled by the drones coming, which I don't have any sort of problem with that. I think that works well. And then they have to create a new plan, which is Jack going up, and he takes Beach up with him to the Tet. They get there, and it's pretty simple, honestly, and that's a huge problem for Act 3, which is the fact that it's so easy and simple, them getting up to the Tet and blowing the Tet up and taking down the huge big old villain of the story. It's very easy, very simple, and then the story ends, and of course we get our quote one more time tossed on to the end. So now what I'm going to do is rebuild the story, fixing the problems that I found, and present the new version of the story as it follows the story circle, and using 4 story circles to outline this story. So first off, in Act 1, we meet Jack, who is a pilot and repairman and one of the last humans left on Earth after the Great War. He is down here to do drone repair and to get the last of Earth's resources until he rejoins the other humans up on the Tet. We hear him say things like he's down here doing his duty. He does it because he's willing to do whatever it takes for those of us who have made it this far. So he wants to do his duty. He keeps the drones operational and the machines working so that he can harvest Earth's final resources. We could also see him grab the book here, just like in the original movie. We also set up the radiation zones, we set up the scavs, and we do any of the other necessary world building, all within the first 10 to 15 pages of the story. Now we have our unfamiliar situation, or our inciting incident. A ship comes out of the atmosphere and crash lands nearby. Jack goes to the ship. Mission Control tells Jack to stand down, but Jack goes to the ship anyway. When he gets there, he finds human survivors of the crash. He's astounded by this and is looking around trying to find all of them when the drones arrive. The drones start killing the survivors. Jack is shocked by this. He doesn't understand what's going on. He finds Julia, and for some reason he recognizes her face. He doesn't know why, but he recognizes her. And because of that, he saves her life. He stops the drone from shooting her, and he brings her back to the base. Finally, back at the base, Jack is confused. He believes something is wrong about what he's been told. He doesn't understand why the drones have shot humans. Victoria wants to report finding Julia to Mission Control, but Jack wants to wait. Something in him is uneasy now. He's not sure who he can trust. In Act 2, Part 1, Jack wants to find out what's going on. Julia tells him that the flight record will explain everything. She still doesn't tell him who she actually is, but she tells him that that is what he needs to find if he wants to know the truth. So, Julia and Jack get up before Victoria sees and go back to the crash. At the crash, they look around and find the flight record, but they are captured by the scavs. The scavs bring them back to the base, and we again have the same sort of sequence where Jack wakes up and he meets Beach. Beach explains that the scavs are not aliens or robots or anything like that. They are humans. And he also says that the Tet is not what Jack thinks it is. It is the AI that came down to destroy the world, and that humanity actually lost the war. Jack can't believe this. He denies everything. He believes he's being tricked until he listens to the flight record. And the flight record shows him what happened. We hear the original Jack Harper and Victoria heading towards the Tet, and we see what actually happened. Jack still can't fully believe what he's hearing. Here, Beach explains that Jack is a clone, and he explains the history of the clones coming back down to Earth and fighting against the humans as the soulless machines of the Tet. While Jack is trying to process all of this information, Beach asks for his help. They have a drone, but they need Jack to load it with a fuel core so that they can fly it up to the Tet and destroy it. But the drone will not listen to the humans, it only listens to Jack. Jack does not agree to help them. He's freaked out by everything that's been laid on him. He doesn't give them an answer. And this is where Sykes speaks. He tells Beach that he knew this wasn't going to work and that they can't fight the Tet. They must flee further inland and hope for the best. Beach begins to despair. Maybe Sykes is right. They can't win this fight. Here, Julia and Beach get a moment to talk. Beach explains to her how long they've been fighting and how much they've lost. He's done everything he can to not give up hope, but maybe it really is over. Jack was their last shot, and if he can't help them, no one can. While Julia takes in this information, Victoria has tracked Jack's location, and the base is attacked by a drone. The humans fight off the drone hard, but it gets inside and wreaks havoc. Jack watches as Beach is shot. Sykes is able to destroy the drone, but Beach is horribly wounded. In this moment, Jack runs up to Beach, and Beach tells him that if he wants to know the truth, he must visit the radiation zones. Now, Jack escapes. He leaves with Julia and heads back to base. Jack is crushed. He's lost his purpose, he's lost his soul, and he feels nothing. He doesn't believe he is an ally to these humans. He doesn't understand what's going on. He feels fully crushed. In Act 2, Part 2, Jack wants to find the truth. When he gets back to base, he talks to Victoria about everything that he's been told. Victoria says that they've lied, or it's not real, or it's fake, or it's a falsehood, or it's manipulation. She tries to just get Jack to believe that all of this is not real. And then Victoria offers him something. Another memory wipe. She says that you're not one of them. You don't owe them anything. They're liars, and we can go back to the way that things were. Weren't we happy? If you choose them, you'll die and lose everything. You want to spend your last days in a dry cave defeated? While Jack considers this, Julia helps Sykes get onto the base. Sykes has come to convince Jack to help them. He tells Jack that Beach died in the night. Sykes again reminds Jack that he can find the truth in the radiation zones, and if he wants to know truly what's going on, that they should go right now. On the other side, Victoria tries to convince Jack to stay. This man is a liar. We're not letting him in, and you should not go with him. Jack is torn, but he can't turn back now. Jack chooses to go with Sykes. Sykes takes him to a radiation zone and shows Jack a clone of himself. Jack cannot believe it. It's him. The clone spots them and jumps the two men, and his drones come in for backup. At the same time, Victoria betrays Jack. After speaking with Mission Control, she sends drones after him. Jack, Sykes, and Julia run away from the drones in a crazy battle. And through this battle, Sykes is energized by Jack. He sees that Jack is more than a clone. A part of the man that once was is inside him. After they escape in Jack's ship, Sykes says the surviving people must be led, and that he could use Jack's help. Jack is starting to find his purpose once again. In Act 3, Jack has finally teamed up with Sykes and the remaining humans to destroy the Tet. They're going to free humanity, and this is the one final shot. So the initial plan is the same. They're going to send a drone, and Jack is going to get it working, arm it, and send it up to destroy the Tet. So Jack gets the drone working again and arms it, but it no longer listens to Jack. He's been decommissioned by Mission Control. And so the second that the drone is live, it immediately signals more drones to come. This creates another massive battle. They fight off the drones, but many humans die, and the drone they grabbed is destroyed. Everything seems lost, but they can't give up now. This is when Jack says he has a plan. Jack tells Mission Control that he's bringing Julia up to the Tet. And for some reason, they get in very easily. They fly up, fly right into the Tet, and everything seems to be going well. But it's a trap. Jack is taken to a prison cell. The Tet shoots his ship and disables it, and the bomb is taken from him. Down below on the Earth, swarms of drones attack Sykes, Julia, and the remaining humans. Everyone is going to die. This is the end of humanity. A clone of Victoria is in the Tet. She tries to convince Jack to give up one last time. Down below, Sykes and Julia do their best to fight off the remaining drones, but it looks hopeless. In the fight, Sykes gives a way for the human soldiers to flee, but they decide to stay with him and fight to the end. Back up on the Tet, Jack is restrained and brought before the Tet. He is going to die, failing everyone back on Earth. But in a sudden reversal, Jack brought his clone up with him. The main pilot of the ship up to the Tet has been the other Jack clone the whole time. Our Jack has snuck out of the ship, grabs the bomb again, and sprints towards the Tet AI. He arms the bomb, raises his arm for beach, and throws the bomb. And as the bomb flies through the air, timer counting down, we see Sykes, Julia, and the other soldiers fighting against the drones. And in Jack Harper's voice we hear, "And how can a man die better than facing
fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods?"
That is the Oblivion rewrite. Now again, this isn't perfect. You could spend months perfecting this, but this is a quick version of what it might look like with a much stronger philosophical conflict, characters with beliefs, and a stronger structure. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that breakdown of Oblivion. And if you're interested in working with me one-on-one to find every single major mistake in your screenplay, fix those problems in a new rewritten draft in just 90 days without a frustrating rewriting process, then click the top link below this video and we can have a conversation about working together. If you've made it this far, please leave a like, and I'll see you guys in the next video.